Operation Bloodhound was the 6th operation to ever grace Counter-Strike servers, just 6 months after the end of Operation Vanguard. Bloodhound cost a standard $5.99 and ran from May 26, 2015, all the way until October 1st, 2015. So, what did it bring? Well, we got a plethora of new skins, many of which I'll be giving away later in the video. We received 4 brand new maps, 2 returning favourites, some gameplay tweaks to casual, a new game mode, a new case, and finally, a big change to how we received our in-game drops. The first hurdle to tackle is the new XP system, which affected everyone, regardless of Operation Bloodhound ownership. With Bloodhound, Valve changed the way that our randomly timed weapon drops were handled and made them act much more predictably. Once per week, you could level up and receive a weapon drop from one of the following map pool groups: Bank, Dust 2, Italy, Lake, Nuke, Safe House, and Train. If you paid for Operation Bloodhound, this would allow you to get your weekly drops from a rarer drop pool dubbed the Operation Bloodhound Exclusive Weapon Collections, and featured skins from the previously included Cobblestone, Cash, and Overpass collections, but also included 3 new collections which I'll go over in greater detail later on. But they were the Gods and Monsters of the Chop Shop and the Rising Sun collection. So, how did you earn all this experience? Well, you earned XP just by playing on Valve official servers such as Competitive and Deathmatch, but you could also earn additional Operation experience by completing your journal. That leads me swiftly onto the topic of the Operation Journal, which was much the same as the Operation Vanguard Journal, which predated it, with a few small minor changes. Because of the new experience system, you no longer received a map-specific drop or a weapon case for completing each mission. Instead, you received experience towards leveling up, and once you'd leveled up, that's where you'd receive your exclusive drop. The journal still featured the Operation missions that people long for today and included 2 Operation campaigns, Marksman and Revolution. Now these missions have been overhauled slightly to focus a little more on building a story, using a comic book narrative at the beginning of each mission. There were 2 narrators, being either Sebastian Henneket, a sniper tasked with taking down members of the Phoenix Connection, or Valeria Jenner, the leader of a terrorist organisation known only as the Phoenix. Depending on which campaign you decide to focus on first will depend on which side you see the story from, but ultimately you can still play both sides. The campaign and the story is a little long and convoluted to get into in this video, but I plan to make a longer video detailing exactly what goes on over the course of this operation and subsequent following operations. The style of missions ultimately stayed very similar to how they were in Breakout and Vanguard, being along the lines of get P250 kills in Deathmatch, but now they had additional bonus parameters that would grant extra experience, meaning you could really grind out XP using these. There were some really arbitrary conditions though, such as using a gun from a specific weapon collection, which in hindsight is absolutely absurd. Circling back to the Operation Journal, however, missions weren't all it was good for. Similar to previous operations, the journal tracked players' stats and provided a player and friends leaderboard, just as it had always done, but also retained the brief introduction to each of the new maps. Speaking of new maps, let me introduce you to them. Returning from older operations were 2 fan favourites, CS Agency and D-Season. The brand new maps introduced were D-Zoo, D-Resort, D-Rails, and D-Log. While I won't be covering D-Season in this video, as I've recently covered it in my Operation Vanguard video, I will still look more in depth at the CS Agency, as I didn't go into too much detail about it during my Operation Bravo video. Starting with the new maps though, this is Zoo, created by Squad and Yanzel. As suggested by its prefix, the map is a bomb defusal map set in the United States, specifically San Francisco. The map is rather large, with a beautiful mix of indoor and outdoor combat, and while not a massively competitive map, this map perfectly embodied to me exactly what an Operation map should be. Something you can play competitively and in a more serious environment, but is not the absolute be-all and end-all of its existence. It's a fun map, with lots of pretty lighting, interesting areas to explore, and just generally have a good time on. Some particular favourite spots on this map for me are the aquarium on Bombsite B, and the fact you can jump into all the different enclosures. Also, secret lines are pretty cool. Second up on our world tour is Resort, created by RZL and Yanzel again. The map is still bomb defusal, but this time it's set in France, and features, well, a resort. By this point in CSGO's life, the detail we were starting to see on maps was getting increasingly polished and overall quite beautiful, and I think Resort does an excellent job at showcasing this. Unfortunately for Resort, however, while it may be beautiful, I find that of all the new maps introduced, it's definitely one of the more forgettable ones. The gameplay ultimately boils down to running down a long corridor, climbing a ladder, and then running down another long corridor. Just because the map isn't very innovative for 5v5 competitive play doesn't mean it's all bad, however. I think the map works brilliantly for deathmatch and casual, basically any game mode that has more than 5 people on each team. Next up is Log, created by Catfood, our third bomb defusal map, but also mysteriously a rather ambiguously located map. It isn't specified where this map takes place, but it's probably safe to assume it's somewhere with trees. This map was definitely a fan favourite of the operation, being a rather large and sprawling map with many different routes to the bomb sites. Personally, this map is the map that defines Operation Bloodhound to me. It's one of the first things that spring to mind when I think back to this operation. Whether or not the community shares this viewpoint definitely remains to be seen, but for what it's worth, I really enjoy this map. Again, this map works brilliantly for larger scale game modes, but is diverse enough where it gets away with the large scale. My personal favourite parts of this map were the winding route to B from mid across this rickety old bridge, and the overall design of the area surrounding the A bomb site. I think the way this scoop blocks line of sight is pretty unique, and I love that you can spot any sneaky CTs rotating in, however briefly, through this window. Definitely a very fun map, and one that I think the community still looks back at quite fondly. The penultimate map to cover, and the final diffuse map to show off, is Rails, created by Deolise. And it brings us full circle right back to the United States, or more accurately Detroit. Now, on paper, this map is everything a Counter-Strike map created in 2015 shouldn't be. There's no sand, it's set at night, and most importantly, it's grimy and dingy. I love it. The map feels very abandoned and decrepit, with trains falling off the rails, piles of shit cluttering up the map. You can even one-way drop into some from the back of a site. Shit, that is. It's a rather open and sprawling map, like so many others introduced in this operation. When stood behind the A site, that is incredibly apparent. I'm sure if the map was remade today, there'd be some significant changes to how this bomb site is designed, but I think the openness of it is quite unique. Furthermore, I like the amount of one-way drops there are in this map compared to others. Just the other side of a bomb site, there's this small vent on the floor that you can knife and fall through to rotate off of the site. I think it's just a neat little touch that adds that little bit of extra depth to the map. Speaking of depth, this map has a lot of verticality and things you can just leap off of. You can launch yourself over these stairs, off this railing at B, off this catwalk into middle. There's just so much fun to be had launching yourself at the ground and shattering your knees. Unfortunately, I think this map is also often forgotten and overlooked when people look back at Operation Bloodhound in favour of Log or Zoo, and I think that's a shame. This map had a lot of potential for unique gameplay when compared to some of the other maps, but perhaps people just didn't vibe with the dark and depressing atmosphere as much as I do. Finally, is the only hostage map to be included, being Agency, created by Puddy and Rick. Now, this was one of only 2 returning maps from previous operations, but was certainly a fan favourite. As previously said, I don't think I did it enough justice when I briefly mentioned it all the way back in my Operation Bravo video, so here it is now. Still set in the United States at the top of a corporate skyscraper, Agency was a different take on the hostage game mode. Not as drastic as a map like Insertion, but definitely tried to shift up the formula. The map was essentially a 3-lane map, similar to how most bomb defusal maps are designed, such as Dust 2, and this was a pretty interesting way to approach the hostage game mode. It allowed for a lot more utility to be used in order to close the gap between the defending terrorists and the aggressing counter-terrorists while still being held indoors, allowing for increased weapon variability across the board. Shotguns and SMGs are very commonly seen across the map, with snipers taking towards the right-hand side of the map or towards the long corridors and open sightlines of the main eating area. I love the modern style of Agency and definitely think that the map has stood the test of time. Hell, it must have done because it was recently reintroduced into CS2 with a swanky new facelift. This map is very much a fan favourite of anyone that wants to tolerate the hostage game mode without being confined to the long, narrow corridors of Office. There is actually a final map, but I'm not really sure how we'd categorise this going forwards. For now, we'll refer to this as a Guardian map. This was a brand new map created for the brand new game mode, exclusively limited to the Operation Guardian mode. In this mode, you had to defend a bomb site while killing 50 enemy bots. In future operations, these sorts of maps would be scrapped in favour of just doing Guardian missions on pre-existing maps, but this map exists as a sort of test, a little toe in the water if you will, for the game mode moving forward. Interestingly enough, this mission required you to pick up weapons off of the bot waves instead of just being able to buy, to try and at least increase the challenge of the mission somewhat. Unfortunately, there's not really much else to say about this map. I just think that it's cool to have this small piece of Counter-Strike history preserved, even if it was essentially just a test. Getting back onto the topic of the Operation Journal and the missions, like Vanguard, you achieved stars for progressing down certain pathways of each campaign. Different paths had different difficulties, and depending on which you went down, you'd end up with doing different missions and receiving a different amount of stars at the end. As was the new norm by this point, the stars correlated to what style of coin you achieved. You got the bronze Bloodhound coin for simply activating the Operation Pass, you got the silver coin for getting 9 stars, and the final gold tier for achieving 14 stars. On top of looking hella swag, your coin also tracked your in-game stats, and mercifully by this point I'd started playing the game so I can stop mooching off at other people's coin stats, but as you can see I didn't really understand the point of the missions. Finally, that leads us to the new weapon skins collections, of which there are 4. There's the brand new Falchion case featuring 16 community designs and excitingly a brand new knife, as well as the 3 previously mentioned collections, Gods and Monsters, Chop Shop, and Rising Sun. As mentioned earlier, I will be doing a skin giveaway, and that'll be all these skins on screen as a way to say thank you for 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love to give back to you all for that. To enter the regular skins giveaway, you just need to comment on the video and I'll hand those out over the course of the next 2 weeks. But I have also got a Falchion Knife Black Laminate to give away, and that'll be exclusively limited to subscribers. Just make sure to comment and be publicly subscribed to enter, and I'll pick a winner at the end of the next 2 weeks. Starting with the weapon case, in Mil-Spec there is the Galil Rocket Pop, the Glock 18 Bunsen Burner, the Nova Ranger, the P90 Elite build, the UMP45 Riot, and the USPS Torque. Moving up into restricted is the FAMAS Neural Net, the M4A4 Evil Daimyo, the MP9 Ruby Poison Dart, the Negev Loudmouth, and the P2000 Handgun. In Classified, we've got the CZ75 Yellow Jacket, the MP7 Nemesis, and the SG553 Cyrex. Finally, in Covert is the AK-47 Aquamarine Revenge and the AWP Hyper Beast. As for the knife in this case, it was the brand new knife, the aptly named Falchion Knife. It came in all the original knife finishes, being Forest Didipat, Safari Mesh, Scorched, Boreal Forest, Stained, Urban Masked, Night, Crimson Web, Blue Steel, Slaughter, Case Hardened, Fade, and finally, Vanilla. Interestingly, the Falchion Knife and I have quite a long history, as not only was a battle-scarred Safari Mesh Falchion Knife my very first knife, but out of my 11 years playing this game, I've only ever opened 2 knives, both being Falchion Knives, a Falchion Knife Black Laminate, and a Falchion Knife Freehand. Moving on to the exclusive weapon collections, we'll start with the Gods and Monsters collection. In the lowest consumer grade quality, we have the MP7 Asterion, the Dual Berettas Moon in Libra, the Nova Moon in Libra, and the Orc Daedalus. Moving up into the industrial grade, we have the P2000 Pathfinder, the M249 Shipping Forecast, the Tech 9 Hades, and the AWP Sun and Leo. Jumping into the mil-spec, we have the UMP45 Minotaur's Labyrinth, and the MP9 Pandora's Box. The 2 restricted skins in this collection are the G3SG1 Kronos, and the M4A1S Icarus Fell. Penultimately, in Classified, we have the M4A4 Poseidon, and finally in Covert is the infamous AWP Medusa. Next is the Chop Shop collection, featuring in consumer grade the Scar 20 Army Sheen, the M249 Impact Drill, the Mag 7 Seabird, and the CZ75 Army Sheen. Moving into the industrial grade, we have the Galil Urban Rebel, the USPS Para Green, and the Desert Eagle Knight. Mil-spec has the MP7 Full Stop, the 5.7 Nitro, the CZ75 Emerald, the P250 Whiteout, and the Mag 10 Fade. The penultimate restricted tier has the Dual Berettas Duelist, and the SG553 Bulldozer. And finally, in the top classified rating, is the M4A1S Hot Rod, and the Glock 18 Twilight Galaxy. Finally is the Rising Sun collection, with the Sword Off Bamboo Shadow, the P250 Mink Kimono, the PP Bison Bamboo Print, the G3SG1 Orange Kimono, and the Tech 9 Bamboo Forest, all in consumer grade. Moving up into industrial tier, we have just 2 weapon skins, the P250 Crimson Kimono, and the Desert Eagle Midnight Storm. Going into mil-spec, we have the Mag 7 Counter Terrace, the Tech 9 Terrace, and the Galil Aqua Terrace. What you're about to see in Restricted isn't me being a muppet, I promise, but there is in fact 2 different kinds of the Desert Eagle Sunset Storm. One has this symbol at the end, and the other has this symbol, but both count as 2 separate skins. You also have the 5.7 Neon Kimono, and the M4A4 Daybreak in this tier. Penultimately, in the classified tier, is the AK-47 Hydroponic, and finally, in Covert, is the AUG Akihabara Accept. So, Operation Bloodhound. Was it a success, or was it a flop? I think hindsight is a great thing, because I know at the time there was a lot of hype around Operation Bloodhound and the new weapon skins. I recall people being a little disinterested in some of the missions, as they were starting to feel a bit stale at this point, but they wouldn't have to wait for too long, as the next few operations would bring about some major changes to the formula. So, what did Bloodhound do well? I think the introduction of the weapon XP system was a good change, as it let people know exactly when they were going to get a weapon or a case drop, and let them work towards it instead of just playing and hoping for the best. As for the missions, I think they were totally fine, some a bit more grindy and less fun than others, but you get these kind of missions in every operation. I think some of the new skins introduced were pretty cool and have since become quite iconic, just look at the AWP Medusa or the AK-47 Hydroponic. And I think the map selection was an excellent balance of old and new maps to keep the game feeling fresh. I think Valve locking the operation rules behind a weekly drop instead of after each mission was incredibly greedy of them, as I think it just lowered the supply of each skin and people felt like they had to keep track of when or when not to level up, judging by some old threads on Reddit. So, where would I rank Operation Bloodhound? I don't think it was as innovative as Operation Vanguard, but it did introduce a lot of new skins and a new game mode. No major balance changes released with the operation, and 2 of the 6 maps released were technically re-releases, so nothing too crazy to report there either. I think a very low B tier is a fair place to put Bloodhound. Not quite as groundbreaking or as innovative or as imaginative as Bravo or Vanguard, but definitely still up there with the content it provided. If you've enjoyed this brief look back at Operation Bloodhound, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a future episode in this Operation series. And please, let me know, what was your favourite skin from the new Operation collections? Don't forget to check out the rest of the videos in this series, and most importantly, thanks for watching.